we're going to read about Rudolf Carnap. So we're going to start reading philosophy. This occasion, the ideas, thoughts, and contributions to the general thought, to the general thinking of Rudolf Carnap. Logic is the last scientific ingredient of philosophy. Rudolf Carnap, 1891 1970. One of the, in context, branch philosophy of science, approach logical positivism. Before 1890, Gottlob Frege, Gottlob Frege starts to explore the logical structures of language. 1921, Ludwig Wittgenstein writes that philosophy is the study of the limits of language. After 1930s, Karl Popper proposes that science works by means of falsifiability. No amount of positive proofs can prove something to be true, whereas one negative result confirms that a theory is incorrect. 1960s, Thomas Kuhn explores the social dimensions of scientific progress, undermining some of the tenets of logical positivism. So, logic is the last scientific ingredient of philosophy. Logic is the last scientific ingredient of philosophy. One of the problems for 20th century philosophy is determining a role for philosophy given the success of the natural sciences. This is one of the main concerns of German born Rudolf Carnap in the physical language as the universal language of science 1934, which suggests that philosophy's proper function and its primary contribution to science is the logical analysis and clarification of scientific concepts. Carnap claims that many apparently deep philosophical ones are meaningless. Sorry, Carnap claims that many apparently deep philosophical problems, such as metaphysical ones, are meaningless because they cannot be proved or disproved through experience. He adds that they are also, in fact, pseudo problems caused by logical confusions in the way we use language. Logical language. Logical positivism accepts as true only strictly logical statements that can be empirically verified. For Carnap, philosophy's real task is therefore the logical analysis of language in order to discover and rule out those questions that are, strictly speaking, meaningless, and to find ways of talking clearly and unambiguously, uh, unambiguously, unambigu- unambiguously, unambiguously, and to find ways of talking clearly and unambiguously about the sciences. Some philosophers, such as Willard Quinn and Karl Popper, have argued that Carnap standards for what can be said meaningfully are too exacting present an idealized view of how science operates, which is not reflected in practice. Nevertheless, Carnap's reminder that language can fool us into seeing problems that are not really there is an important one. With that, we have finished talking about rule of Carnap. I hope this thing has been of your liking because now we're going to get into universal history or the history of the world. And as the title suggests, we are going to talk about today the growth of nationalism in Europe. The growth of nationalism in Europe. So let's start. 1815, 1849. In the wake of Napoleon's defeat, in the wake, what's the meaning of in the wake? In the wake means in the wake of something, following. Tras, después. In the wake of the game, the fans ran onto the pitch. Después del juego. In the wake of the Beatles' success, a number of British bands released records in the US. So, in the wake of Napoleon's defeat, the victorious Allies met in Vienna with the aim of restoring the old order. Yet, the return of familiar empires and dynastic rulers could not disguise the fact that Europe had fundamentally altered. Powerful movements, powerful new movements had been unleashed by the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. Middle class liberals, heirs of the Enlightenment, campaigned for democratic constitutional government and a free market economy. Utopian socialists argued for restructuring society along egalitarian lines. But the ideology that exercised the most powerful grip on the European imagination and presented the greatest challenge to the political establishment in the decades after 1815 was nationalism. Concert of Europe. The dominant figure at the Congress of Vienna, 1814-1815, was the conservative Austrian foreign minister Prince Clemens von Metternich. Under his leadership, the Congress restored Bourbon rule to France and Habsburg control to southern Germany, northern Italy, and much of Central Europe. Metternich hoped the restoration of these dynasties would give political legitimacy to a new order. To maintain a balance of power, stronger new kingdoms were created by merging Norway with Sweden and the Netherlands with Belgium. Metternich established the Concert of Europe, regular conferences between the great powers to resolve any disputes that threatened the peace. Nationalist struggles. Metternich and the other European leaders were quickly confronted by the new force of nationalism that had begun to emerge in Europe during the late 18th century. Increasingly, people wished to live in states with a common ethnic and linguistic identity and, inspired by the French Revolution, under constitutions that guaranteed their rights as citizens. As a concession to nationalism, the Congress of Vienna granted independence to Switzerland in 1815, but ignored the nationalist aspirations of many other peoples. When uprisings broke out in southern Italy and Spain, the Congresses of Tripoli and Verona, respectively, approved firm action to suppress them. 1830 revolutions. 1830 revolutions. In 1830-1831, a series of revolutions threatened to overwhelm the concert of Europe. It began in France with the overthrow of the repressive regime of Charles X. The more radical revolutionaries wished to establish a republic, but the upper middle class Orleanist faction engineered the succession of the citizen king Louis Philippe as a moderate constitutional monarch. Liberals and nationalists throughout Europe were inspired to launch revolutions of their own. Uprisings in Modena, Parma, the Papal States, Poland, and some parts of Germany were all suppressed. However, an uprising against Dutch rule in Belgium met with a divided response from the European powers. The French, under Louis Philippe, supported Belgian independence. Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Britain were opposed, although none were prepared to commit troops in support of the Netherlands. And so an independent Belgium was achieved in 1839. Nationalism in the Ottoman states. Nationalist struggles were generally containable by strong states, less so in the declining Turkish Ottoman Empire. After an uprising in Serbia in 1815, the Ottoman Sultan was forced to offer the Serbs some autonomy. Similar measure of self-rule was conceded by the Ottomans to Moldavia and Wallachia in 1829. In 1821, a nationalist revolt broke out against Ottoman rule in Greece. By early 1822, the Greeks had won control of the Peloponnese. Turkish forces, with Egyptian support, invaded in 1825. They recaptured towns and ravaged much of the Peloponnese, but failed to suppress the uprisings. European powers, alarmed by the chaos and disruption to trade, and impressed by the conservative character of the Greek leaders, intervened on the side of the nationalists. In 1827, a British, French, and Russian naval force destroyed the Ottoman Egyptian fleet at Navarino. The Ottomans accepted Greek independence in 1832. Timeline. Timeline. 1815. The Congress of Vienna reshapes post-Napoleonic Europe. 1815-1817. Serbians gain limited independence from the Ottoman Turks. 1821-1832. Greek War of Independence. 1822-1823. Congress of Verona authorizes France to invade Spain to restore Spanish monarchy. 1830. Louis Philippe is elected King of the French after the July Revolution. 1839. The Dutch recognize Belgian independence. 1848. Liberal nationalist revolutions sweep through Europe, ushering in short-lived republics. 1867. Hungarian nationalists force the Habsburg rulers of Austria to establish a dual monarchy, thereafter known as Austria-Hungary. Years of revolution. Years of revolution. In the year 1848, another spate of revolutions. Spate. What's the meaning of spate? Spate of avalancha, alluvium. Officials can explain the recent spate of murders in the area. Murders, spate. In the year 1848, spate of revolutions, another spate of revolutions swept through Europe, this time coming very close to overturning the existing order. France was once again the catalyst. Demonstrations against Louis Philippe's regime resulted in the king's abdication and the establishment of a second republic. Unrest quickly spread to Hungary, Croatia, and the how do you pronounce this country? Let me look it up. And the Czech lands, where nationalists overturned Austrian rule and set up liberal governments with democratic constitutions. Metternich was forced to resign and flee abroad. In northern Italy, Austrian rulers were deposed and republics proclaimed. Many of the German states sent representatives to a newly created parliament at Frankfurt with the aim of uniting Germany. The revolutionaries were fatally divided over their aims, however, allowing conservative forces to reassert control. In France, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who had been elected president, declared himself emperor in 1852 and brutally suppressed workers' protests. The Habsburgs crushed the rebels in their territories, regaining control over Austria, Italy, and Hungary. The Frankfurt Assembly broke up under pressure from Prussia. So that was it regarding the growth of nationalism in Europe. I will see you on our next episode.